Okay, guys, it is 3 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Welcome to Grades and Record Keeping with Moving Beyond the Page. Okie dokie. There we go. You can call or email customer support at 888-316-8242, press option 2, or email us at support@movingbeyondthepage.zohodesk.com. You're going to reach the Angelas, myself, Angela Backer, or Angela D'Antonio, our West Coast Curriculum Specialist. So we're the two homeschool moms who answer the phones and the emails. We can answer your questions about shipping. We can answer your questions mostly about curriculum implementation and any general homeschooling questions you have about how to get started, where to look for information, how to implement the curriculum, what grades to keep even. So we have both been doing this for about 6-ish, 7-ish years. And so we have a lot of practical knowledge to share with you about homeschooling and homeschooling with Moving Beyond the Page, because we've both almost exclusively used this curriculum for a long time. So if you have questions, we're the ladies to call, okay? So we're almost done with our parent information sessions this summer. We do have some other videos and content coming up. And if you guys have an interest in some further parent information sessions to kind of check in the future, let me know. Email us or call us or whatever, and let me know what you guys want to talk about. And I'd be happy. We can also talk about a format that would work for you. But we've gone through an introduction to Moving Beyond the Page already, which talks about structure and methodology and all of the what is moving beyond the page questions. We've gone through how to choose a level with your students. We've gone through a day in the life. I do have a project that's going to be coming up once I wrap this up to show more in depth what a day in the life will look like for each age level. We've talked about homeschooling with multiple students. We've talked about how to best take advantage of our online curriculum. And last week we discussed learning gates, spelling, and math. Today we're going to talk about grades and record keeping. And next week for our final session, we're going to talk about getting organized. Okay. It says, oh, you have a 6th grader this year, and this is going to be your first official year of grades. That's cool. And we're going to talk about, when people want to start taking grades here in just a little bit when we get started. So you can find our past sessions on our Facebook page by clicking the live or videos tab at the top of the page, or go to our YouTube channel and click the parent information sessions playlist. It'll all be in order there. Or you can go to our website, movingbeyondthepage.com, and under the parent information sessions link at the top of the page, they'll all be listed. Okay. So let's get started with grades and record keeping in general. I basically ripped a lot of this information from a blog post because it was such a good blog post that it just condensed it all just right there. It's a really great blog post if you want to go in and read through it yourself later. But if your child, let's just get this out of the way. If your child has ever attended traditional school, public or private or anything, they've gotten graded a lot. And if your child's never been to public school, they don't have, or any traditional schooling, they don't have that experience of grading. And you guys can really, in that position, can really kind of dictate what the narrative is of what you want grading to look like and feel like for your child. But if they've already been to a traditional school, everything gets graded, because in traditional school, it generally does. You get daily grades, you get quiz grades, you get weekly grades, you get final grades, 6-week grades, But now that you're the teacher, you can figure out what you want to grade, how you want to grade it, and whether you want to give grades at all. The question, but I have to assign grades, right? Well, not necessarily. Depending on the state in which you live, I'm in one of those states that I don't have to assign grades, especially in elementary school. I don't have to submit anything to a teacher that's overseeing my homeschooling or a school district, but there are many places in which you do. Some states want you to, submit a final grade for each subject every year, or they want you to check in, every 9 weeks or every semester. And that is information that you're going to have to research and make sure you find for your individual state. But even if you do have to submit grades, you have the flexibility to choose what you grade and how you grade it. You may want to, just keep a portfolio of your child's work and assign an overall grade to that and kind of show their progress in a more broad way at the end of each year. Or you might want to keep more individual grades or weekly grades, and that is up to you. So one of the first things you're going to have to do is search your requirements by state, and then you're going to have to, in what the law is and what's required of you in your county or in your school district, and work back from there on what you want to keep. I'm not promoting this organization in any way, really, but HSLDA is a really good resource that lists all of the requirements, all of the laws by state. They've got a clickable map, and it's just kind of a great catch-all place to find information. So, and that's at hslda.org. Again, I'm not promoting them. I'm not a member of theirs or anything, but it is a really fast place. If I need to find information about a specific state to help somebody, that's where I go, just because it's easy. Otherwise, just good old Google, type in, homeschool laws by my state, and find your state's education governing body, and find out what is required for homeschoolers to do. If you have to check in with your school district, work with your teacher or whoever your district liaison is, or whatever that you have to, whoever you have to talk to about what grades you need to keep and how you should present them. Okay, because that is a good place to start. Jessica's making a good point. She wants to start keeping grades this year so your child can be a part of honor roll or honor society. If you are interested in enrolling your child in some sort of organization like an honor society, that is a really good way. That's a really good thing to do, is to keep the grades. You're also probably want to look into some different testing to keep in your child's portfolio, whether it's PSATs or something of that ilk, to kind of get your child. I know my counterpart, Angela D'Antonio's children have, gotten to participate in some extra cool stuff through Johns Hopkins by doing some testing. And so that's also a good way to kind of show where you are. I'm not a huge fan of standardized tests, but sometimes they're just kind of part of the deal, right? So as far as why would you want to eliminate or limit grading? Because most homeschool parents I know don't keep a big grade book. It's because it's not needed. In traditional school, teachers have to use grades to show you where your child is, to see how good of a job they're doing, how well they have reached the class in general on a topic. And if their whole class is bombed an assignment, they know they need to go in and they're going to have to, adjust, maybe do some reteaching. So since you're sitting next to them at their desk or the kitchen table or in the living room floor, and you're watching them do their work in real time, or at least checking in regularly through the day, you don't have to assign a letter grade to every assignment. It makes it where the learning is the focus of the day and not the score. And that's one thing a lot of parents, I think, struggle with a lot of time, because they want that score, they want that number, they want that letter grade assigned to what their child's doing. Or that child is used to public school, in which, how do I know I did a good job unless you put, an A on it? Or if you don't take a red pen to my paper, how do I know I did okay? But a lot of times that's not the point of an activity. Sometimes it's just the experience of doing the activity and problem solving throughout the activity, which, as you guys know, moving beyond the page is a lot about critical thinking and creative thinking. And so you can't always put a grade on an activity like that, other than maybe a participation type grade, which you don't really want to be doing. So that's kind of when you would want to limit grades, right? Is when they're not necessary. Then we can move on to when should you start assigning grades. Like Jessica said, she wants to start assigning grades so that she's got something to show, so their child can be a part of different, organizations. But you should generally take your child's age and personality into account before you start marking grades on their papers. For elementary age children, this is especially important because sometimes if your child's personality is that of which they get really self-conscious the minute you've pointed out, like, oh, you didn't quite get that question correct. Or you take a red pen to their paper. If there's somebody who's going to really internalize that and not try to work harder but feel down on themselves, maybe that's not the way to approach it. Perhaps you should just go, oh, hey, we this question, let's revisit this question. You answered it this way, but I think there's a better answer. And you can explore it in that way to kind of keep their love of learning intact without, it being, oh, you got this wrong and you got this wrong. I got a little overzealous with the red pen when I started out, to my detriment. But at those ages, using missed problems as an indication for review or an opportunity for improvement is really what you need to be focusing on, instead of marking their papers with a red pen. Focus on giving constructive feedback on assignments instead of grades in the early years. If you do need to or want to assign grades, you don't even necessarily have to tell your child what the grade is. But if they're motivated by grades, I've got one that's motivated by grades. And if I don't tell her what percentage she got correct, she's beside herself. The whole point is to get 100. So, and that's, just her personality. But I've got one that if I were to do that, she wouldn't perform as well. You want to give them room for creative thinking. When you start taking grades, you need to focus on things like tests, major writing assignments, and this is mainly for moving beyond the page, but I think this is applicable to all curricula. Focus on taking grades for tests, major writing assignments, and projects. If they do have a homework assignment, something that they're supposed to work on, overnight until tomorrow, you can check their work and give them an opportunity to make improvements. You can correct missed math problems and maybe provide more complete answers to science questions and revise paragraphs for language, like that kind of stuff. It's more than just grading, it's revising and it's relearning and it's revisiting. That is more important overall than just what did I get right, what did I get wrong. So when you're grading major assignments, be sure to give them specific things that they need to work on instead of just marking it wrong. You need to talk about, so you answered this thusly, and what the question was asking is, that's one thing I have to do a lot. I have to go, now you answered this, and this is a good answer if the question was asking something else, but it's not. So we need to answer what's being asked. Another really important thing is get comfortable with rubrics. We offer a lot of rubrics throughout our curricula for grading purposes, especially in language arts. And those are provided just for this exact thing, to set expectations, show them where they may have fallen a little short or where they're excelling, and then you can move from there. Use those for tentative grading. Use them for planning through projects, planning through writing assignments. And then when they have that visual there in front of them that you've gone over with them, that's a whole other set of learning. It's a whole other set of problem solving, and it's a whole other set of creativity that they get to kind of work through. Okay, it's not just the topics that they're studying. It's also, how do I take what I've just studied and create something with it? How do I create something with it with these expectations? And how do I exceed these expectations? And when they see where they've fallen short, it's not devastating. It's constructive criticism. Now, when you're coming up on like a math test or something like that, that's another great place to, do some, what's the word I'm looking for? Learn as you go. Instead of going, well, you missed that type of problem. Well, moving on to the next thing. Well, then they don't know it. So go back and give them a chance to fix mistakes for half credit, especially if you have to make sure those grades are, being recorded to submit to somebody. Give them the chance to get half credit for those. Give them the chance to go through and find where they made the mistake, because oftentimes in math, it's usually a simple mistake, as simple as they didn't carry, or they did a process out of order, their PEMDAS was wrong, that kind of thing. That's where you do a lot of learning, is by correcting your mistakes and going, I need to remember that I need to do this order of operations a certain way, or I didn't carry there, I need to slow down and be more mindful about doing my answers. That is just as valuable as, any other learning. Okay. Now, moving beyond the page offers a lot of quizzes, because we have the Learning Gates quizzes for math. We'll talk about those specifically right now. So the quizzes in Moving Beyond the Page math curriculum are not designed to be graded. They are tools to help your child practice concepts covered in a lesson, as well as ones from earlier in the year that they may need to review. So when your child takes a Learning Gates math quiz and they miss a certain question, they're going to see that question over and over again until they get it right so many times. That's not indicative necessarily of what their grade is for that lesson. So you don't need to use those percentages that you get in your emails, your Learning Gates emails, as grades. It's just not it's just not what you need to be using. It's not calculated in a way that's accurate for grade purposes. Okay. So there's two types of quizzes that Moving Beyond the Page does. And at the end of every lesson, your child will take a short Learning Gates quiz that covers the concepts covered in that lesson, as well as customized review questions like we just talked about that cover problems your child had missed in the past. It's okay if he gets questions wrong. Learning Gates quizzes are adaptive. So missed questions are just going to be seen over and over again for more practice. That's why they don't need to be grades. Your child will receive either the exact question or a different question about the same topic. So it's not grading the lessons that they go with. Okay. If your child is struggling with certain skills, they're going to keep receiving practice on those skills, and practice doesn't always need to be graded. You don't need to be grading practice all the time. You need to be grading their overall understanding. Some math lessons have standalone quizzes. So there's a quiz either in their book or online. And sometimes those look like the Learning Gates quizzes, but the questions in the standalone quizzes are not repeated over and over. These quizzes can be used as an indication of your child's understanding of the specific topic or skills covered in the quiz. If your child misses several questions, he needs to go back and cover this more, and not move on quite yet. This is like what a teacher in a classroom would be using a grade for, like, oh, they made a 40% on this. That means they failed, at least in the US, that means you failed and you need to redo this. That's what you would use as a grade more than the Learning Gates quizzes, because it's an indication of how they did on that lesson. This is another example of you need to go back and let them correct that quiz. You need to go back and let them correct that little short quiz in the book so that they understand what they did wrong, and get more credit for it. There are unit tests at the end of every math unit starting at age 7 to 9 and up. So those are really the best thing to test your child's understanding of like a whole unit. And they will, if they had gone through and done well on their quizzes, or if the ones they didn't do well on, they got reviewed and they've got a solid foundation, then you can test their knowledge of the whole unit, mark that grade down, and move on. If there are a few things they missed, again, do a little correction opportunity, mark that new grade down, move on to the next thing. This is where grades make sense in homeschooling, where otherwise they wouldn't so much. So another comment, another thing I've done is in math, if they did a careless error or misread a number, but with the new number they got it right, then I give them half credit and discuss it, because I can see that they got the process right. That's the thing. As mom or dad or you know, parent who's doing the homeschooling, you see that you understand they got that right, and that doesn't really need to be reviewed. It was just a careless mistake, which is a different thing you need to be discussing than you didn't understand the process of this math problem, right? It's just like, hey, slow down. We need to, you know, I've got a child who gets some numbers mixed around. And so sometimes, you know, that's the same thing. Did you really, you know, when she was younger, did you really miscalculate 6 plus 6, or did you see 6 plus 9 that day? And so, you know, and you know what you're dealing with better than other people do. So you need to tailor your grading, you need to tailor your instruction and your feedback to what your child is actually experiencing. That's kind of the most important thing. I think a lot of parents get into homeschooling and they sit down and go, okay, I've got my red pen and my grade book, and this is going to be, you know, the best classroom that, you know, anybody's ever seen. And you just can't do school at home and call it homeschooling, because it's not the same thing. Most parents kind of lose that quickly because they realize that that's not necessary. You're sitting side by side with your child doing their work. You can go, oh, I get it. You didn't write it down correctly, but I understand. I knew where you were going, and so move on, you know. And that's why grading is so oftentimes not necessary, especially in the younger years. But as they get older and you need to keep those records for various reasons, using those little tricks like that, like, I know what you were doing, I'm going to give you a half credit for this, only half credit because you were being careless. Those are the kind of things that you can come up with on your own that makes sense for your family. So the same thing with the spelling quizzes, like the math quizzes in Learning Gates. The spelling is an adaptive system. They may see between 5 and 10 words in a word list, and sometimes they're going to get several of those wrong, and they're not going to fall off of their word list in their quizzes until they get it right 80% of the time they see it. That's not a grade you need to take. It's just not. It doesn't make sense. It seems like a nice easy grade. Oh, I'll just write that down, but it's not indicative of what they've done in spelling. Okay. I would do more overall grades for spelling, a completion grade even, because once they've gone through all the words, then they know all the words. They did the thing for the year. So maybe semester or even just a yearly subject grade for that when they've completed it would make the most sense to me. I said this earlier, and I'm going to say it again. Get comfortable with the rubrics. This is just one example, but you can see here, we'll kind of talk about the grading process for a project like this. So for age 11 to 13, there is a Greek myths unit, really cool unit. And the final project, they're going to put a new twist on an ancient myth. So they need to write 400 to 500 words of a new myth story. And you can see here how you would grade this. And again, I'm going to suggest that now this is in the book for them to see, because at this age level, it's student directed, but at younger age levels, if maybe they don't see the rubric, show them the rubric and talk about it. Talk about what the expectations are. Talk about, do I follow the conventions of a myth? So and explain, you're going to get graded on if you follow the conventions of a myth. Did you do exceptionally well at that and get the best marks, or did you not? Did you make up your own thing and it didn't follow the conventions at all? Because that's something they're going to have studied in the unit. Does my story have a clear beginning, middle, and end? A problem and a solution? Again, grade them on that. This is going to help them plan as well. It sets out clear expectations, because if the expectations aren't clear, that's where I find my family struggles the most. I didn't set clear expectations on what the assignment needed to be and what I wanted it to look like. And so when I got it back, it's not what I expected. So either I messed up and didn't communicate effectively what I was wanting, or they didn't create what I asked. That's where it's kind of on you. Is the sequence of events in a logical order? Grade them on that. Is my story 400 to 500 words? Now that's another thing. You can go, okay, you only wrote 200 words. Come on. You know, you obviously needs improvement. If they hit 399, 450, and you felt like they could have elaborated a little bit more, make it acceptable. If they wrote 500 words and it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever read that they done, give them exceptional. That's, you know, that's kind of how you have to do a little thinking about what am I going to consider needs improvement, is acceptable, and is exceptional. Do I vary the length of my sentences? So we're getting the grammar in there, and that's a lot for you to think about, but it's a lot for them to think about as well. And then you go through voice and creativity and conventions. I won't go through every single one of those, but you can see how you need to set an expectation, work with them through the planning process, the rough draft process, bring up the rubrics of these projects and writing projects as often as you can, because if you give them that clearest expectations, they're going to usually give you a really great final product that they're proud of and you're proud of. And I know that when you go back through and revisit the rubric when they've made their final, you know, draft of whatever it is they're doing, and you go through line by line and explain why you graded them, how you graded them, that's the most constructive criticism I think that you could give. The most constructive feedback you could give is by showing them what they did exceptionally well, but then giving them wiggle room for improvement, okay? Now, once you've taken all these grades that you've decided to take for writing projects and final projects and unit tests for math, there's several just different ways you can go about recording them. They still make paper grade books. I've had one over the years. You can get homeschool grade books. You can get them for multiple students for multiple subjects. You can find them on Amazon. You can find them at teacher supply stores, Mardell's, whatever's nearby you. You can find grade books anywhere. Teacher supply stores are fun to go into. They have homeschool apps, grade and record keeping apps. I think one's called Homeschool Minder. Even there's a wealth of applications for tablets, for laptops, web-based record keeping. If you in some of these have subscriptions, fees, some of them are free. You know, you can find what works for you. This is going to help you not only keep your grades all in one place, but also plan your year. If you're that type of person. Moving beyond the page doesn't really require that kind of planning because it's all laid out, you know, a lesson a day right there, just open and go, boom. But if you're somebody who wants to write down, okay, on Monday we're doing lesson 1 and unit 1 of concept 1, you know, if that's you, awesome. If this is also a place to keep up with your days you've done school. So if you have a requirement that you have to do so many days of school a year, this is a great place. This is a great way to keep tabs on that. Do it what you did, lesson, unit, activity, you know, do a little lesson planning in some sort of application or even an Excel spreadsheet or Word document or one of these things that I've explained. That's going to keep up with your attendance record that you may need to keep depending on where you live, and your grades. Attendance grades sometimes can be a good record to keep for showing, you know, if you've got, you know, officials who want to see that sort of thing. you know, and these are great tools to use to do that kind of thing. I keep everything. I used to spend the money on all those apps and things, but I just keep things in a spreadsheet in a Word document. That's just the easiest thing for me, because I've got, you know, different kids doing different things. And it's easy to go, you know, I can look at it on my phone. I can look at it, you know, on my computer, whatever I need to do. When you're nearing high school age, even more so, if you're here, you know, nearing middle school age, and you're at that cusp of maybe I want my child to go back to traditional school, or I'm getting ready for them to maybe start participating in community college courses, or anything in which somebody's going to want to say, I want to see what courses they've taken, what they've read, what they've been doing, what are the standards that are covered. Good records to keep are your course descriptions of classes they've taken, curricula they've used, the book lists for that year. Moving Beyond the Page has huge book lists for every age level. Those are impressive to people, that your child has read that many books in a year. It really is impressive, because most people don't read that many books. And a list of the standards that are covered. If you're wanting to, like I said, I've had lots of parents call me and say, I don't know what to show the school that they did this year. I can't just take the box of curriculum up there. And that's where, putting together what all your child has worked on that year is a good idea. Even if it's just copying and pasting things from the websites of the companies you ordered curriculum from, or if they took a little out-school course, or they did courses through Khan Academy, or something like that. Gather everything up they've done and put it in a Word document or something like that, so that way you have something to present to whoever's asking for it. I went through and had to do a transcript recently for my oldest. And not only did we have to list everything she did for high school and the grades that I assigned her for those classes, but I had to give course descriptions and book lists and show what we actually did. And so when you're nearing the end of the homeschool journey, for your child, and they're going to go off and do something else, whether it's community college or trade school or university or whatever, that's when you're going to really wish that you had kept up with some of this stuff. So while we really recommend it in the early years, you don't spend a lot of time worrying about grades. You do need to consider keeping up with the things that your child has studied as a whole, especially starting in middle school into high school. A lot of families go from homeschooling in middle school and attend high school, or they start readying themselves to enter back into traditional school in middle school. And so that is a good time to just start getting that stuff together. Obviously, you don't have to. I homeschooled my kids all the way, or my oldest all the way through, and I intend to do the same with my younger two. But it's always good to have those bases covered. You never know. Life gets crazy and things change, as we've seen in the last year and a half or so, that you never know what might come up. So it's good to have everything kind of documented about what you've done and how they did. It's best to figure out what your goals are, maybe even overshoot a little bit on those goals, and then kind of work back from there. That's always my greatest advice when parents go, oh my gosh, if we go to college, what do I do? How do I know what colleges require? How do I know? Well, all that information is on websites of any organization your child might want to go to in the future, be a part of in the future. So set a lofty goal. It may not even end up being what they're doing. And then work back from there on what you need to do to get to that goal. Keep records of what that they're going to want to see to get into that program or to attend that school, or, etc. It's always better to do more than to scramble at the last minute and try to remember what your child studied 4 years ago in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. The nature of homeschooling is such that sometimes kids are studying high school math throughout middle school, or they're studying upper level language arts, writing strategies, and comp and rhetoric and things like that younger than they would have in a traditional school setting. So don't think that just because your child is 12 or 13 and they're doing, you know, more advanced work that you don't need to take note of that, because you can use that for their advantage later on. So make sure you just, you keep up with what they're doing. It's very important in the long run as they get older. But individual grading is not necessarily the name of the game as far as record keeping on the whole. You want to show that they have had a well-rounded and holistic, you want to show a holistic view of what their education experience has been each year. And, you know, one quiz on one math topic that they found particularly, you know, irritating or annoying or boring, you know, shouldn't be, you know, shouldn't kind of drive down an average of what they're really successful entire year. So just keep those types of things in mind. And again, don't try to guess what records you need along the way. Reach out to your education organizations in your state to make sure you know what you have to have legally. And also do that research as they near the grade levels that matter, you know, the high school grades, the upper middle school grades, where grades start to count more towards what their future is going to look like. Go ahead and start researching that and keep up with what changes. That way, you know what you need to keep a tab on for the future, okay? Does anybody else have any questions? There were a lot of good comments and more questions today than there had been. Anybody? I'll wait just a few seconds. Don't forget to call or email customer support at 888-316-8242 option 2, or email support at movingbeyondthepage.zohodesk.com when you are, you know, feeling like you've got questions that you can't find the answers to, you know, on the website or something like that, or visit with you. That's what we do. You know, conversation tends to work things out better in everybody's minds. Okay. I'm going to give it just a few more minutes to see if you guys have any extra questions, and then we will wrap it up. And next week it will be kind of a fun one. It's about getting organized and shipping times lately. Right now, I have happy news for that. Right now, shipping times are about 1 to 2 business days for new orders. And as we get into August, though, I would expect those to stretch to more like 3 to 5 business days. We over prepared this year. We didn't want to keep people waiting. So we definitely over prepared this year, and it has been working out well so far. So if you put in an order today, you'd likely see it ship in about 2 business days, I would say. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys listening. Your great questions. You can, you know, drop more comments with questions. I can address those after we're done. Again, don't hesitate to call or email. Happy to help you out. So I appreciate everybody coming and listening today, and we'll see you next week. Okay. Thanks.